Hello and welcome to the second part of lesson 1.4. Today we're going to be looking at the absolute values. Now before we start with the actual absolute value itself, we need to understand a little bit about a few things, okay? So first of all, we have what we call opposites. Opposites are numbers that are the same distance from zero on a number line. So you can see on this number line right here, we have in the positive direction or the blue direction here, we can see that we go 4 units to the right. So this would be our positive 4. And then the opposite of that would be with the same distance except to the left, which would be a negative 4. So if you're looking at this from a distance standpoint, okay, and distance is kind of key, both of these increments, negative 4 and the positive 4, fall 4 units from 0. So again, these are opposites because I have a negative 4 and I have a positive 4. Now when we're looking at integers, integers are both positive and negative whole numbers. So remember, a whole number is something like 1, 2, 3. There's no decimals, no fractions, okay? And then the integer portion comes in with the fact that we're dealing with the negatives as well. So we can think about this as either positive and negative whole numbers, or we can say whole numbers and their opposites. So now we're going to look at something called the absolute value. Now the one thing you have to remember when you see absolute value is absolute value is referring to the distance that a number is from 0 on a number line. So it doesn't matter if we are in the positive region or in the negative region. It wants to know what is the total distance to 0. Okay, now what I wrote down here is it says the symbol is going to be like these two vertical bars. And then typically you'll have a letter or a number inside of it. So you can see right here, like this is read as the absolute value of 2. Now I could do the absolute value of 5. You could say the absolute value of a negative 3. You might see something that says the absolute value of x. Okay, so these are, anytime that you see these two vertical bars, we know that that's read as the absolute value of whatever is inside. Now, if you want to think about it, though, you should really be thinking about it as what is the distance from 0 that number falls. So for the absolute value of 5, if I think to myself, what is the distance from 0 that 5 falls, we could actually go to our number line. So here is my 0 value. And if I put my 5 right here, I can see that this is going to be 5 units from 0. Likewise, if I go and I do my negative 3, I can go and plot my negative 3 right here, and I can see that this distance from 0 here is actually 3 units. Okay, it's not a negative 3 units. I want to know what the distance from 0 is. So the distance from 0 is just going to be 3 units. So let's go ahead and look at a quick example. Example 3 wants us to use a number line to find the absolute value of negative 5 and the absolute value of 5. So again, I'm just going to kind of draw a line in here so you can see where the 0 falls. So the absolute value of negative 5 tells me to find the distance from 0 of negative 5. So if I come over here and I plot that, this right here is negative 5. When I look at my distance from 0, I can see that that's really 5 units. So the absolute value of negative 5 is really equal to a positive 5. Likewise, if I come and I look at the absolute value of positive 5, well, my positive 5 falls over here. So I'm going to plot that there. And when I look at this from a distance from 0 standpoint, I can see that I have 5 units there. So the absolute value of a positive 5 is also equal to a positive 5. So notice, as long as my absolute value is on the kind of like is hugging or surrounding a number, whether it be negative or positive, both of my answers are going to be positive. And they're both going to be positive because they are both the same distance from 0, and that distance is going to be measured as a positive 5. Now let's take a look at our final example. Okay, so it says find the absolute value of a negative 13. Okay, so in your head you need to say how far away from 0 is a negative 13, and that would be 13 units. Likewise, when I look at the absolute value of 23, in my head I'm thinking how far away from 0 is 23, and that would be 23 units. Part C says the absolute value of 3, or I think to myself, how far away from 0 is 3, and I know that that is 3 units. Again, we have a negative 1, or the absolute value of a negative 1. So how far away from 0 is negative 1? Well, it is only 1 unit away. So right here, I want you to think to yourself and let me know if you have any questions on the parts A through D. Okay, now E and F are going to be a little bit different. Okay, and these are a little bit different because if you notice, on the outside of the absolute value, I have a negative symbol here and here. So if you have a negative symbol on the outside of the absolute value, you need to think of that a little differently. Okay, so what this is really saying is I have a negative 1 times the absolute value of 13. So the way I would do this is I would say you have to treat the absolute value like a parenthesis, okay, or a grouping symbol. So order of operations tells me to do that first. So the absolute value of 13, or how many units away from 0 is 13, and I know that that answer is 13. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to do my multiplication. So then I have negative 1 times 13, and negative 1 times 13 is actually going to give me a negative 13. So this right here is really my final answer for part E. Okay, and F is going to be similar. Now F, again, has that negative 1 on the outside. So that's really like saying negative 1 times the absolute value of a negative 13. So again, order of operations tells me I have to do my grouping symbol first. So I have negative 1 times the absolute value of a negative 13, or again, I think to myself, how many units away from 0 is a negative 13? Well, that is actually 13 units away from 0. But then I have to go back and multiply it by this negative 1. So once I multiply it by the negative 1, I still end up with an answer of a negative 13. Okay, so think about that. If you have any questions on these, please let me know in class. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you guys later.